Have you ever walked beneath a tree and wondered how it always seems to know when something is wrong long before you do? Maybe you have noticed leaves suddenly turning bitter to insects, or seen one part of a tree struggle while nearby trees somehow seem prepared for the same threat. It feels almost impossible, but scientists have discovered that trees can warn one another when danger arrives. At first, the idea sounds like something from a fairy tale. Trees have no mouths, they have no ears, they do not move from place to place. Yet for decades, researchers have gathered evidence showing that trees exchange information in ways that are surprisingly effective. When insects attack, nearby trees often receive a warning before the attackers reach them. The story begins with a simple problem. Imagine a caterpillar chewing through the leaves of a tree in your yard. To us, it looks quiet. The caterpillar eats, the leaves disappear. Nothing else seems to happen. But inside the tree, a remarkable chain of events has already started. The damaged leaves recognize that they are being eaten. Cells break open, chemical signals rush through branches and stems. The tree begins producing defensive compounds that make its leaves less appealing or harder to digest. In some species, these chemicals can even reduce the growth of the insects feeding on them. That alone would be impressive. Yet many trees do something more. They release tiny airborne chemicals into the surrounding air. These compounds drift away on the breeze. Nearby trees detect them and begin preparing their own defenses before any insect reaches them. In other words, one tree experiences the attack, and others receive the message. A famous example comes from studies of acacia trees. Researchers observed that when browsing animals fed on certain acacias, the trees increased the production of chemicals that made their leaves less desirable. At the same time, they released warning compounds into the air. Neighboring trees exposed to these signals often started boosting their own defenses as well. Picture a line of trees along a dusty road. One is being stripped of leaves by hungry insects. The wind carries invisible molecules through the branches. A nearby tree receives the chemical message and quietly changes its chemistry before the threat arrives. To anyone walking past, nothing looks different, yet an exchange of information has already taken place. Scientists sometimes call these airborne chemicals volatile organic compounds. The name sounds technical, but the idea is simple. They are tiny scent-like messages released into the air. In fact, many of the smells we associate with plants are connected to these compounds. The scent of freshly cut grass is one example. That familiar smell is not just a pleasant fragrance. It is partly the result of chemicals released when grass blades are damaged. In a sense, the lawn is broadcasting information about injury. Once researchers realized plants could communicate through the air, they began finding examples almost everywhere. Tomato plants, bean plants, sagebrush, poplar trees, and many other species have shown similar abilities. When damaged, they send chemical signals that influence nearby plants. Some signals do more than warn neighboring trees. They also attract help. Imagine a caterpillar chewing leaves on a tree. The tree releases specific chemicals into the air. Those chemicals can attract insects that prey upon the caterpillar. The tree is not calling for help in the way an animal might, but the effect is surprisingly similar. A chemical message spreads outward, and predators arrive that reduce the damage. It is a remarkable strategy for an organism rooted permanently in one place, yet the story becomes even more fascinating when we look underground. Beneath every forest floor lies a hidden world. Tree roots stretch through the soil in every direction. Intertwined with them are networks of fungi. These fungi form partnerships with trees, connecting root systems across large areas. Scientists often describe these fungal networks as a kind of underground communication system. Through these connections, trees can exchange nutrients and chemical signals. Imagine standing in a forest after rain. Above you, trunks rise toward the sky. Below your feet, unseen threads weave between roots like living pathways. Information can travel through these networks from one tree to another. Research suggests that when some trees experience stress from insects or disease, chemical signals can move through these underground connections. Nearby trees may respond by adjusting their own defenses. The details are still being studied, and scientists continue to debate exactly how much information moves through these systems. But there is broad agreement that forests are far more connected than they once appeared. For a long time, people imagined trees as isolated individuals competing against one another. Modern research paints a more complex picture. Trees still compete for sunlight, water, and space. Yet they also participate in networks of interaction that help shape the entire community. A single tree is not just a tree. It is part of a living neighborhood. Think about the old oak in a park, the maple on your street, or the fruit tree growing behind a house. They may seem silent and solitary. In reality, they are constantly responding to signals from insects, weather, soil conditions, microbes, and neighboring plants. The world they experience is rich with information. Perhaps that is why forests often appear so resilient. When one tree encounters a challenge, others may gain valuable warning. Defenses can spread through the community before the threat reaches every individual. The forest becomes more than a collection of separate organisms. It becomes a web of relationships, and once you begin seeing trees this way, everyday places start feeling different. A row of trees beside a sidewalk is no longer just scenery. A stand of pines on a hillside becomes a community exchanging signals. Even a small backyard garden reveals itself as a place where plants are constantly sensing and responding to one another. If you enjoy exploring these hidden stories of the natural world, consider subscribing to Global Wild Origins. It is always a pleasure to share these quiet discoveries with people who are curious enough to look a little closer. There is always another secret waiting just beneath the surface. What makes all of this so meaningful is not merely the science. It is the reminder that life is often far more connected than it first appears. The natural world rarely fits into the simple categories we create for it. We tend to separate things into neat boxes. Animals communicate. Plants do not. Creatures move. Trees stand still. Yet again and again, nature gently shows us that reality is more interesting than our assumptions. Trees do not talk with words. They do not hold conversations the way humans do. But they share information. They detect danger. They respond to warnings. They influence the behavior of neighbors. In their own way, they participate in a continuous exchange that helps them survive. So the next time you walk beneath a tree, remember that the silence may not be as silent as it seems. The leaves overhead could be releasing messages into the breeze. The roots below could be linked to a vast underground network. Warnings may be traveling from one tree to another while the entire process remains invisible to human eyes, and that ordinary tree you pass every day may be part of a conversation that has been happening all along, hidden in plain sight among the leaves.